The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. We're going to give everyone a minute or so to log in, and then we'll get started. Welcome to the Property Manager's Guide to Resident Retention via social media, brought to you by Soci and Multi-Housing News. I'm Suzanne Silverman, Editorial Director of Multi-Housing News. The U.S. apartment market is large and growing, with 20.4 million apartment homes housing 38.8 million residents, together contributing more than $3.5 billion to the economy every day, according to the National Multifamily Housing Council. The organization predicted apartment household growth will expand by 4.6 million people by 2030 in response to a number of trends. Generally speaking, the U.S. population is growing, prompting a need for more housing of all kinds. But more specifically, three big generational groups are snapping up apartment units, in many cases as they flock to urban areas. Many baby boomers are downsizing into apartments as they retire and pursue an easier and more flexible lifestyle, while millennials and their younger Generation Z siblings just entering the workforce are better equipped for rentals and home ownership and are likewise attracted by the greater affordability and flexibility of apartment life. At the end of June, national occupancy stood at 95.5%, according to Yardi Matrix data. And while rent growth has slowed, it continues to climb thanks to healthy demand. In fact, the peak in new deliveries expected next year does not concern Yardi Matrix analysts in the face of the 4.6 million apartment homes NMHC expects the U.S. to need by 2030. Strong demand, however, doesn't reduce competition. Apartment owners and managers are challenged to differentiate their properties, and for older units in particular, that competition can be tough. Standing out means understanding what's important to renters, and that may not necessarily be what you think. A recent study from Village Green Apartments found that renters are extremely focused on amenities. When searching for an apartment, prospective residents ranked community environment among their top 3 criteria, and their list of most important elements needed ranked high-end amenities 4th, after hominess, a fit with their lifestyle, and online maintenance requests. But amenity preferences are changing. A recent MHN Kingsley Associates survey found that not only are traditional offerings like a pool, dog run, or gym not enough to win over the season's renter, formerly trendier requests like dog washing stations are giving way to a preference for yoga and Pilates space, 24-hour coffee stations, ride-sharing and Uber pickup areas, and community bonding events, especially among millennials. Property upgrades can also attract attention, whether they address safety, comfort, efficiency, or even just curb appeal. So can energy efficiency and other sustainability efforts, not to mention technology, from high-speed Wi-Fi to online interaction with management, which includes everything from filling out the application to rent payment to maintenance requests. For all this, though, it's still important to pay attention to the basics as well, such as cleanliness of common areas, secure entryways, and good lighting. All of these aspects can make a difference in impressing potential residents and retaining existing ones. First, though, you need to attract people to your property. Here to talk about the role social media can play in this is Jacob Chappell, Vice President of Sales for Soci, and a recognized social media and marketing expert with more than a decade of experience. With an exclusive mix of executive insight and marketing solutions, Jacob has been responsible for brand management, corporate sponsorships, and strategic business development at Soci. If you have questions for Jacob during the course of his presentation, please write them in the question section on your screen, and he'll answer as many as he can during the Q&A period. And now, Jacob, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Stu. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today. I'm very excited to talk a little bit about this topic. It's something that I feel that is a question I get all the time from a lot of different property management companies I wanted to briefly introduce myself. I am Vice President here at Soci. I work in the enterprise cells across all of our different property management groups, helping them scale and effectively manage their social and reputation management using our platform. And with that being said, and what we're doing today in our whole topic of conversation, we really focused on the experience of a resident and how they are interacting across social media channels, but more importantly, for property management groups at the corporate level, regional level, and individual location level, property managers are able to effectively build out a social strategy to retain and attract new residents. So to get us kicked off, I think about social media as something that's continuing to evolve. I look at social media kind of as in its diapers, and it's more of its infancy stage as it's seen its impact across so many different business channels. We are very passionate, again, to talk about social media just because we've seen it impact business on a daily basis. And we've seen that when you start thinking about the different elements of how social can change that renter's perspective, you realize just how important it is in an overall digital marketing strategy. And so some fun facts I wanted to share with you. If you look across the digital marketing spend year over year, it's nearly around $70 billion. And businesses today are taking about 10% of that $70 billion, so little over, give or take about $7 billion, and allocating it to social media and reputation management. So that is a big number. And traditionally, year over year, we've seen this number continue to increase. And so our property management groups are faced in ways to look at historical marketing practices and legacy spend and look at an opportunity to really optimize to be able to deliver results. There's a lot of different objectives that you can get from social media. I want to highlight just a few that we hear on a daily basis. When asking the question, why am I on social media, we often hear groups say, I want to try to grow my brand awareness. I want to focus on SEO and ranking. I want to drive more signed leases. I want to focus a little bit more on the customer service side, resident retention. We've seen a slur of all these different types of options that we have in our overall strategy. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that social media has really become the new search. And so if you think about this, is that from finding a place to eat or finding the next place to live, we have our residents as well as our prospective residents utilizing social media. And so in here, 65% of renters look on online reviews and ratings to help their search. So just really making sure that our businesses are staying with the trend of overall digital strategy and cross-channel marketing. And within that focus, understanding that there's a lot of different ways that we can be successful in being able to capture those prospective audience. So to do this, to get started, I want to highlight, who is actually using social media. And I want to highlight 3 of these very common social media networks that we've seen in the property management space and highlight a little bit of the demographics just to make sure that we're all on the same page as we talk through this. So as we know, Facebook, again, with over 2.2 billion users, we have over 1.6 billion daily active users. We can see that 88% between the age of 18 to 29 years old are using Facebook. We've seen also that 84% between 30 to 49 years old use Facebook. We've also seen here, specifically around Twitter, we have 36% between 18 and 29 years old are using Twitter, while 23% between 30 to 49-year-olds use Twitter. And then the up-and-coming network, which is, if you think about Instagram, is kind of still in the ecosystem of Facebook. Instagram has surpassed over 700 million users, and we've seen a huge jump there. And again, understanding that we may have a little bit different demographics within Instagram as these other traditional and long-lived social networks. So 59% between 18 to 29 are using Instagram, while 33% between 30 and 49-year-olds are using Instagram. So the idea here really, again, is making sure that we are understanding the users and which networks that they're on, but more importantly, looking at that renter life cycle and taking the new renter versus the old renter. So where does the search start, right? When I'm looking for a place to live, or I'm currently living at a place and considering my options, right, where does that actually start? And we know a lot of that starts in a mobile phone when they pick up their phone and start browsing and start looking at social channels. And then the idea, again, is just understanding that in the different types of demographics that we're reaching, if we're reaching in the younger audience, depending on our properties, we want to make sure that we look at the evolution of this convenience factor. And we're in the day and age with Amazon really just powering over these businesses based upon convenience. With a click of a button, you can have something arrive at your house within 30 minutes, an hour, depending on your location. And we understand that this is a huge shift, and using social media and being able to leverage that trend is going to provide a lot of results for your businesses. So I wanted to highlight a few very important and crucial fundamentals that would allow for your team to have an effective social presence, as well as being able to utilize all of the nuances built within settings and built within just the standard best practice when you're managing and controlling your social profiles and networks, especially when you're managing, hundreds of different pages, and being able to have a process by which you can make sure it's all consistent and looks good. So I want to highlight a few of these things because these are very important for lots of reasons. So number one, when you are working with a new property, new build, new construction, and you have the benefit of being able to go out and create new handles, my word of advice is making sure that you can go out, even if you're only choosing to have some presence, maybe in Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, go out and create all of the networks. So you can go out and create all of those networks and create handles just so you have those available. Because if not, again, those can be taken by somebody else. So having that consistency across your different page names or handles would allow for an individual to easily find your property. The next piece here is, again, creating that type of consistency, making sure that the first impression does matter. So if someone lands on your page and someone starts to interact, the first thing that they're going to see is your profile picture and cover image. So I find that it's really important, again, to make sure that you have the right image, look, and feel. And keep in mind that this can be, it's not so static, this can be fluid. It can even be seasonal, where you want to update and change that type of content. But more importantly, just making sure that it has the brand and message of that specific property. The next piece here is in looking at the informative bio, just making sure that you can highlight, what exactly your brand does, making sure it's consistent across messaging across multiple networks. Some of those networks actually have longer bios that you can go and put in there, but more importantly, when I think about this, just making sure that it's consistent across multiple networks. And the idea behind that is you'll realize that not all individual users out there and potential renters and residents, right, are using every single social network or are engaging on a daily basis in every single social network. And some utilize social networks for more of a business reason, such as like LinkedIn, or as Facebook, maybe it's more personal. Again, Instagram may be more personal. And so there's different use cases behind there. And our goal, as a property manager or as a property management company, is to make sure that we are seen across those specific channels and just making sure that the information is consistent and matches our brand. The next piece in here is just understanding that traffic that can take place going from social media and pushing it back into your website, landing page, maybe it's a splash page. It's making sure that you have the right and appropriate link that matches your property. And we've seen this time over time. Sometimes you go in there and quickly add the link. Make sure you go and test it. Make sure it's sending them directly to that location. It's a horrible user experience if I am a potential renter. I found social content that you've written, or it came across, or I was targeted, and then I go into your page and I want to link back into your website, and it doesn't take me anywhere, or it's an outdated link. So that's something to make sure that you are looking at. The next piece, too, is just really focusing on your hours of operations. As we know, during certain times of the year, or depending on what type of property, if it's a, if it's a senior living property, conventional market rate property, maybe it's a student housing property, there may be some shifts of operations, of times, right, and seasonality of when you have open leasing office hours. So you want to make sure you can accommodate all of that information. So again, that stays consistent, even for your listing purposes, and making sure that, as the search engines are pulling that information in, it's all consistent. That's the meta description that they may display. The high-res photos of offerings, this is an area where we see a lot of groups fail. You guys spend a lot of time in creating those professional and digital assets. Let's make sure we get those out and put those not just in your website, but utilize those assets even into your social media channels. It's really easy to go in there and upload an album or utilize that to create a nice cover image. Those type of digital assets should be utilized multiple times over. Even if you want to go in there and highlight some floor plans, or if you have 3D floor plans, etc., those could be assets that you can utilize from social content down the road. And lastly, I see this on a daily basis, is seeing that groups are not even familiar with the idea that you have to claim even your social media pages. We're familiar of claiming, maybe our Google page, but sometimes we don't even go in there and claim such as our Facebook page or other type of social or review sites. So being able to go out and verify the authenticity and claiming that page, usually it's a 1 or 2 step process. Sometimes it's a phone call where they'll reach out to the number that's connected onto the page. Sometimes, for example, in Google, they may send you a postcard. These things are very important. Follow the process. If you've not done this, feel free to reach out to us. We can show you exactly how to do it, or you can Google this process. But make sure that you have a verified page. And to verify that it is verified, which is really important, this is something that you can pull up. For example, if it's Facebook, you can actually go into the settings, and there's a little tab in there that shows if your Facebook page has been verified and claimed. Once it has, it will display, and also it will display actually when someone is looking for pages. There is a caveat here, and it's set across multiple social networks that if you verify your page and claim it, it will increase your overall ranking. So this actually has a direct correlation to how you're being found and ranked within those social media engines. So I want to highlight here on the kind of the day-to-day process. Once you've gone out and done the initial of creating your page, now it's talking about the most important thing, which is content, content, content. And I want to highlight a couple tips here that I think that are quite valuable for groups as they're going out and building out a social strategy, and also going after, kind of the content and the frequency of when they're posting. So these are some tips that I find that are quite valuable for a lot of groups that been able to implement at the corporate level and been able to push this out to the individual property level. Now, the first thing is being able to make sure that you have a way to control and monitor all of your locations. So if you're in the boat and on this call today and you're doing it natively, God bless your soul, that's amazing that you're doing it, especially if you have 50, 100, 200 plus properties. There's technology out there like Soci again that will allow for your team to go out and to manage and control everything in one place. And for the corporate team to be able to go out and support those individual local pages and being able to go out there and support the property managers to contribute that content, this technology is going to automate a lot of the steps and just make it very simplified so that they're literally just filling content within specific days that you're mentioning. So I always think it's important for you guys to pick a consistency, right? Pick a cadence that you feel comfortable with and also that your followers are going to feel comfortable with. Remember, don't spam your potential residents. Don't overpost. And I know that's very hard to gauge, and people ask all the time, well, how many posts, right, is overposting? When is it considered spamming? And the data is so important because the data can dictate, how you are doing. So the tip here is posting sporadically. Well, again, if you're out there and posting sporadically, you may not be, again, engaging with those individuals and those that are following the page. They may just, they may trickle off and may unlike your page and not follow your page. So you're trying to find this happy medium. Again, I think looking at the data, looking at the analytics. If you're looking at your individual location data, you can actually go into, for example, if we're talking about Facebook, you can go into the insight data and see what your posts have done. If you have 100 fans or 1,000 fans, you can see if your post is reaching it from an organic perspective. If you're allocating dollars in a paid perspective, you can look at that balance and there's ways to optimize that, again, just kind of leveraging best practices within specific social networks. The other piece here is, if you think about this, if you are from a resident retention focus, if you're using your social content to be add, offer, add, right? And that is what you're using your content that lives on your walls. The challenge you may face is that at time for renewal, if I keep seeing that you are offering a lower rate or we're offering a lower rate, it may be a little bit more challenging for the property managers to get that person to renew without trying to negotiate a different rate. So the idea here is making sure that you're thinking about the content that you're creating and making sure that it aligns with your overall objectives for that community and what you guys want to accomplish. And I talked a little about that early on, right? Whether that's focusing more on conversion, resident retention, and the content that you're creating, again, needs to mimic that strategy. And so this is something that we see time and time again. The data is so important to look at when you're making decisions. You don't really have to guess anymore. The data is valuable. You can see it right in your face, and from that data, you can make your decisions and how you guys can optimize the posting strategy. This next piece is a question I actually get all the time, and I wanted to highlight today. When people ask, which social network should I be in? And I always go back again. I'm a very data-driven person, so I think about, where are the biggest networks? Where should I be? What's important for property management? We see there's a lot of, kind of in the first level type, social networks, or your Facebooks and your Twitters, et cetera. And then you kind of have your secondary ones, and you have your trust, you kind of that third level, right? And so the idea here is making sure that if you're focusing on that first level, if that's your brand, if that's your initiative, and you want to be within these specific social networks, wonderful. Let's make sure that we create and build out a strategy. And sometimes certain social networks will mimic, so that you can go out and create content, and that content can get published to more than one location, and the content would actually resonate and be relevant in there. So an example where it wouldn't, so sometimes the content you create maybe in a Facebook post would not resonate or be relevant in such like an Instagram post, because Instagram, again, is a highly visual network. But there's some ways, and again, using technology, being able to hook up your individual locations will allow for you guys to syndicate content to multiple locations. And there's a lot of different social media strategies that you can implement to get to those end results. So there's this acronym that you may have heard, and I've used it multiple times, is what we call more of COPE, right? Create once, publish everywhere. Don't just post content to post. That doesn't really help you. If you publish good quality content, which is relevant to your marketplace, again, that content will gain traction. And depending on that social strategy, right, depending on your bandwidth and resources, et cetera, you can syndicate that content to multiple social networks with a click of a button. And at times, if your team may not have the appropriate infrastructure to accomplish these specific goals, again, working with the experts and professional services that can actually do this with you or do this for you, just to make sure that you guys can get to those end goals. So again, if you're dialing into your demographics, understanding who's living at your property, who are your current residents, who are your prospective residents, and understanding who that is, again, you would like to go out and kind of build out that strategy and create goals, and then make sure that you are creating content and publishing it at least in the networks that would represent your audience. And the next one here is really thinking about this as kind of that trial and error where you test and test and test again. So a lot of us, again, as marketers, have done a lot of A and B testing, right? From email campaigns, should I send out this email or that? Social media is very similar, because the nice thing about social media is if you post something, you're actually able to see instant feedback. Did it catch? Did it go viral? Did people hate this? Did no one interact? It's real-time data. And if you look at that data, this is going to give you the opportunity to be able to optimize, to make it better. There's kind of an analogy I always think about social media content strategy, and I kind of parallel it to maybe a fishing experience. So if you're going after a specific type of fish, there's some key elements that you would need to do if you go fishing, right? It is making sure that you can identify what kind of bait that fish would like to eat, right? Making sure that you know when they're out there and swimming, and again, so understanding the time of when they're out there. Also thinking about the location, where are they actually going to be? And then also, the most important thing is the activity. Are they going to be on the go? Are they going to be swimming? Are they dormant? Again, thinking about all those different things taken into consideration, I think that has a lot to do with kind of social media. So we want to make sure that we can create the right content with the right bait. We want to make sure we're posting at the right time, in the right location, or in the right social networks, and making sure that we speak to them with that right activity frequency. And so all of those things are really important. So I look at, again, look for technology that would allow for you to optimize the time to speak with your local residents and local audience, because if you do so, you have two really great potential outcomes. You can increase your potential reach. Those are the eyeballs that are going to be seeing your content. And the second piece is increasing your overall engagement. If you're speaking to them at the right time with the right type of content, you can potentially increase the likes, comments, shares, and clicks. That's the overall social engagement. And in doing so, right, this should be more of kind of, rinse and repeat. And let's do it over and over again. Let's use data to support our decisions. And it's really removing that guesswork of what I should be doing on a daily basis. So these are some really effective tips, again, that I've seen organizations implement, and they've had a lot of success. I also wanted to share more of a content strategy for apartment communities as we think about, that day-to-day, resident that's out there, or the prospective residents we're trying to reach. What is the type of content that will resonate with those individuals? And I think I see a lot of groups out there that kind of get it, but I also see a lot of area for improvement. So I wanted to highlight some great facts as well as some tips that will help in this process. So I would say the first one, again, is when you are looking things at a macro level, and if you're sitting in your corporate seat, again, looking down, and each individual property technically has its own community persona and demographics and location and amenities and makes it special X, Y, and Z, right? And then the property next door, again, has the exact same thing, especially, depending in your different pockets of the nation or in different states or regions, cities. So the idea here is when you really look at social media and try to build that local social marketing, what property managers can do, having their feet on the ground, is focus on hyper-local, right? We see that word quite a bit when we talk about marketing, but let's talk about the use case here in social media, being able to really geo-target a specific environment, right? We're looking at micro-level analytics, and we're taking all that data in and being able to share it. And the beauty, when you have a local page and your individual property pages, there's a difference for the prospective renter. There's a different experience that they can capture through social media that they capture when they're on your website. The website is truly a great conversion tool. And I would say a lot of renters, again, I would say they're much more sophisticated, but the new renter allows for that person to utilize your website information, the data that's out there, maybe the ILS listings that you're found in as well, but they're using social media and these review sites as a source of validation. And understanding that to be able to deliver a raw, authentic experience is usually found within social media. So we want to try to highlight that from a content perspective as well, right? So making sure that if you are trying to focus, if retain is the game, you want to make sure that you want to highlight local attractions. You want to provide a stream of content for your current residents, right? Again, you want to make sure that you can highlight the perks of the neighborhood. You want to highlight the potential residents, again, what they love learning about, living in that city, or again, for current residents that are always looking for new experiences. There's a lot of great information and resources. There's even technology that's been built that can source and pull localized content with a click of a button. Just searching for a key term, it can go out and pull that content at the fingertips, empowering your team to use data to support the content strategy that you want to deliver. So again, there's other ways that I think about if you really want to focus on this hyper-local And a lot of companies will say, great, well, where do I start? I have 0 fans on my page. Or, hey, where do I start? You know, we don't have a big following. We don't get any interaction. I think, again, it's, you know, how do you get started? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do from at a location level where this is something that needs to be baked into the conversation, even during that initial, you know, property tour, letting them know that you guys communicate, you know, the events that are happening or things that are taking place at the properties, and trying to get them to gain, you know, to gain that social media awareness and to get those individuals to start following those social pages where you guys are active in. And so from there, you want to build that into maybe a potential offer or incentivize them to follow a page, et cetera. It maybe inserts into a drawing. There's a lot of different ways to get them to go in and interact with your social content. Just really building it into the overall new resident workflow and training and operations. And these are sometimes that we forget to ask, but if we ask, again, people are more likely to do something. So I think about it as kind of that multi-touch, right? If you're asking them, they see it, they may see a hard collateral that's available. Maybe there's a logo in certain places. Maybe they see links on your website. They see links on your page. Making sure that you are touching all those different areas so they can look at that, and you should be proud of what you're displaying across the social channels. Again, right? The site is where you are going to start the conversation. People are going to learn that information, or they may see it across social, and they're going to continue to explore across your social and review sites for that validation standpoint. And that social media, I think, really kind of tells that story, and it tells the untold story, and kind of reads between the lines between what you can offer within your website. So the next piece here is, as you're illustrating kind of that community lifestyle, I think a lot of people struggle to share the true experience of living at the property. So a lot of us fall into, let's just keep highlighting amenity, 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 but sometimes there's not connection between the amenity and that lifestyle and the individual person that could live at your property. So I want to share a couple things that I've seen that are quite valuable. And these are little things that are really in line with the different trends that are happening in the marketplace, and things that even the property managers can do that will really focus on 2 things: the customer and resident retention here for those that are, you know, that are current residents, as well as the prospective residents. So a couple things is, you know, sharing the experience of living at the property is really great. So creating short clips, you know, you could do a quick little video, or resident testimonial goes a long way. And especially if it's a smaller community where a lot of people know each other, those have a tendency to get a lot of interaction. And then the other piece is whenever you're highlighting content that has been created by the user, so user-generated content, when you then highlight that onto your page, well, that person gets really excited, they get the spotlight, and sometimes they will go reshare that with their social network. So you're going to get additional exposure. And so these are little subtleties that we've seen that will be able to drive those additional conversions. You know, and then the other thing is, if you do want to highlight your amazing amenities and how they're going to foster new memories, build and tell that story. So there's a fantastic example where I was at a property and I was visiting one of our clients at a property, and they were telling us all about this amazing kitchen that they had. And one thing that we were talking about is, you know, they kept highlighting the different cool pieces about the club room and the kitchen, but they weren't really telling the story, and they weren't showing how like this could really interact. And they started coming up with new ways to highlight these amenities. So for example, what they were able to do is they were able to talk about how you can host your next party. You know, they actually started offering cooking classes, and what they would do is they would have 10 different, 10 different slots that were available, and everyone could bring a friend. And that was something, again, to foster that type of relationship where you can bring in new prospective residents and also foster the relationship for those current residents, because this was a really great amenity and there was no charge. They absorbed that cost as more of a resident retention, marketing budget. And then the other one was, there was this other property that they were sharing this. They kind of had this kind of a, I would say more a universal dance room. So it was glass windows, and there was a hardwood floor, a lot of it used for dances or for, they would do meetings in that room. But they were able to find other ways to adapt into like new amenities, and they were highlighting on social media, and they were getting a lot of interaction, and people were really excited about it. So they started to do, they'd bring in local Pilates teachers that would use that same shared space in there. They could come and bring yoga instructors. They did events where they could bring in people that could come in and maybe present some type of a craft, and they could bring some friends. But the idea here is this is where you want that ability, again, to share that community and that lifestyle and what it would represent for those residents, and so that they can kind of think outside the box. Or also, these are things that they would share within their social networks that will drive more conversation and get more people interested into your property. And all that traffic and all that interaction is really going to help your overall, overall goals. So the last piece here I think is really important is making sure that when you think about the apartment living and that lifestyle, and you think about your ideal renter or your current resident, make sure that when you create content that you appeal to your future residents. And you can do so by making them really feel like this is going to be their new home. And that is something that we forget all the time. So you can create content that would be valuable for them, things that they're going to do on a daily basis. That could be seasonal type content. So, we're coming close to the holidays and making sure that we can highlight specific, maybe it's recipes, maybe it's something that is talking about events that you could do or tips for organization, etc. There's a lot of things that you can provide in there, and there's different types of content here that would resonate with that apartment dweller. And so making sure that you can highlight, again, so it could be DIYs, core tips to inspire current residents, to give their apartment a makeover. There's a great different news sources where you can grab this information from, like apartment therapy, etc., where you can go out and see some great ideas. And this is the type of content that your residents really love. And if you look at your interaction, if you start posting this type of content, you can compare it to your other types of content you've created in the past, you may see an uptick. And obviously what we try to do is rinse and repeat. So you continue to optimize and make sure you're giving the right type of bait for those residents and current as well as prospective residents. So as we're out there and building out a social content, these are things that we push out into the marketplace. These are things that we're out there and delivering our name, pushing our brand awareness. But let's not forget that sometimes the conversations come back to us. And we've seen a lot of groups struggle here of being able to manage the influx, right, and that waterfall of social conversation as well as reviews. And we understand, and what we can tell you is that there's an economic impact to having good reviews as well as having bad reviews. So don't be afraid to respond to the negative reviews. And also don't make it a strategy where you only respond to the negative reviews. This is an opportunity for your team to really sit back and look at your current protocol and start working through a process as you look into 2018 is how can you be more effective? How can you get more from an online reputation strategy? And how can this, again, really focus on your resident retention or having it so that you can also go out and attract new residents? And so the idea here is making sure that you can reply promptly. There are so many times where we talk with groups and we can find reviews that are out there that are years old, and they say, well, what do I do? What do I even start? I haven't responded to reviews ever. We don't like reviews, and we hate these negative reviews. Of course, no one loves negative reviews, but we got to be able to respond. And making sure that, a person that writes the review and a person that writes a negative review really wants to vent, and they want to get that out across a lot of different platforms. And the interesting thing about the world we live in today is that any person has a soapbox, right? And they have a new medium to get in front of potentially hundreds or even thousands. And in the worst case is when something goes viral to millions and millions of people that obviously in no way, shape, or form provides brand equity. It actually provides, that type of negative impact for the business. So I think about it where we want to make sure that we can respond promptly. Let's be able to diffuse the situation and be able to jump into that conversation. The next piece is, right, being able to acknowledge negative feedback and to be able to, take that conversation offline in the best way possible, but more importantly, try to personalize the message. Do not, and I repeat, do not automate your feedback. The worst thing that you can do is automate it or have a company just basically do it for you and they just post the same exact thing for all your posts. Don't do that. That actually elicits and it makes a person more angry when you don't even respond to their specific topic, right? If you go in there and they're upset about X and you talk about Y and Z and all these other reasons, that person's going to feel like they're not heard. And even though that you actually went and responded, it didn't give you the impact that you were hoping to get. So the next piece here I think about is let's take it offline, right? Let's not argue. Please don't get into a battle on social media, into these review sites. If someone says something, especially for a property manager out there, don't take it personal. The multi-million-dollar asset, that's not yours. You're working at that property, right? I know you want to take it personal, but don't. So let's take it offline. Sometimes it's good to regroup, maybe step away from the computer for a moment and really think about it objectively, right? And thinking about it versus that subjective manner and tone of if something was a personal attack. Again, you want to be able to take that conversation online and do it professionally. And one of the things that I think that are so important, again, is if you take that conversation offline, this allows for your team to diffuse the situation and fix and repair. If someone was upset, let's understand why they're upset, and maybe it was our fault. So let's acknowledge that. Or maybe it was something that was a miscommunication. I've seen that quite a bit, where you could take a very angered resident or a prospective resident that had a horrible experience, but sometimes there's a miscommunication. I showed up and no one was there at the leasing office. Maybe a disaster happened. Maybe something took place. And so, again, you have a chance to open that dialogue with them and just make sure that you utilize that in an appropriate manner. But more importantly, through all these things, let's not forget the basics, to say thank you. Whether it's positive, whether it's neutral, whether it's negative, say thank you. They've taken the time. They've put the energy to deliver to you authentic and real feedback. And this is an area where you can learn. If you've seen, a couple of different reviews in the same theme, this is an area where you can actually stop and say, okay, well, I've noticed that, some of these reviews that are coming in, they're talking about parking, or they're talking about this, or they're talking about noise, or whatever that may be. This is an opportunity for you to address it, or address it within your peers, with your property management company, and be able to take it to different, operation team there to allow for you guys to address the issue. But say thank you to those individuals because they've taken their time to join in on that conversation. We actually at Soci wrote a blog that was called The Economics of the Bad Review. If you want to look at it, we get pretty in detail of what that affects, even from a dollar value, from ROI perspective. You can actually reach out to me directly at jacob@meetsoci. We also have it available on our website. We spent a lot of time that it's been picked up by a lot of different social media distribution networks. So I think, again, this is something that would go a little bit more detail in regards to kind of having that bad review or negative review. And the other piece, again, is just understanding that all of this does matter. For every star, and this is something that I found really important, so for every star that your company loses, it actually, so in a review site, you actually lose about 5 to 10% of total revenue. So this is where it can cost actual dollars to your business. And understanding that, again, across all of these different social networks and review sites, and we know that they're coming for validation, 88% of our customers or residents, right, trust reviews just as much as personal recommendations. And even 92% of those consumers and residents now read online reviews. So we understand that this has been a huge increase. And so making this a top priority for your guys' team, again, still fits within that overarching social and online reputation strategy. So the question, and again, the topics that we've covered, and this is a great question to pose to your team, is your property or your location ready to retain residents? So are you, as you kind of went through a checklist, are you doing all of these things? If not, again, we'd love to have that conversation with you. I put up my information here available. So my email directly is jacob@meetsoci.com, and our website is meetsoci.com. We're more than happy to have that conversation. So I'll turn the time back over to Sue, and thank you everyone for the time today.
Thank you, Jacob. We'll now move into the question and answer portion of our presentation. If you have a question or comment, please type it into the question section on your screen, and we'll answer as many as we can today. Our first question is for profile images on social pages. Is it generally better to be a little more corporate, for instance, showing buildings or logos, or personal, showing photos of residents or of the property management team and so forth?
That's a really great question, and I want to answer it in two different aspects. The first one is going back to your brand messaging tone of the property, and then also focusing on your demographics. Sometimes we've seen really creative ways where you actually can take an image and have your actual cover image embed into your profile image, and so you can find creative ways to do that. And again, maybe that doesn't fit in that specific property that you're at, so maybe not go in that direction. But this is usually coming from just your overall general best practice. If you highlight, your cover image or someone of the staff and those individuals at the property, that's a real personal touch to it. But for some groups, again, maybe it's highlighting amenities. So I've seen this vary across the board. I don't want to say a set answer, but I usually go back to I would say go back with your marketing team or your marketing managers or your property management company. Make sure that if your property would align in this, maybe it would be a new approach in how you guys want to handle that. Feel free to try. It's something that you guys can make seasonal and change. It's during the holidays. I've seen groups that will customize a cover image that would fit towards the holidays. Obviously, after the holidays, then they're going to shift maybe into themes that they're creating. So maybe the theme switches to fitness in January. So then they want to highlight that the property and maybe an aerial shot of the property is near some trails. So everything is now tailored to fitness. It changes. So I don't want to kind of a say-all answer for everyone, but this is something I would just go back with your guys' your team to make sure you can collaborate so that you don't go in a direction that would deter from what that image and message is for that property.
Okay, our next question is in the realm of resident retention. Can you address the role of social media, particularly for the age 30 plus group?
So if I understand the question correctly, when you create content, there's two ways that you can effectively manage and control a social strategy. And I'll put the first one in a organic bucket. That's the content that you create, and you'll speak to the subset of those specific followers that are on your page. So when you're if you want to talk to a very targeted demographic, that's where we move more into a page strategy, where we can create content where we can effectively boost and promote our content to only those demographics, right? So again, if you have a very dialed in demographics where this is where your property, again, can create, overarching content that can live on your wall, that lives in that organic approach, and then create more targeted content from a paid perspective. Again, if you're not too familiar with that process, talk to the experts that can kind of walk you through that. And then there's a lot of great tutorials, even Facebook.com. You can go into their ad manager to learn more about how to utilize that, or work with your marketing team, again, to collaborate as far as what the overall approach is. They may be doing it for you, or they may be hiring another company to be doing this so that you guys aren't wasting marketing dollars. Just make sure there's clear communication.
Thank you. For our next question, what types of content would you find effective for lower income residents of affordable housing who, in some cases, they can't take advantage of cultural offerings or they lack transportation? What would you suggest is effective content for your site?
That's a really great question, and I look at it two ways. What we've seen historically on tax credit and affordable properties, it's a very different social strategy. They have the luxury, I would say, of not really worrying about having to drive new people to their, to their property. They typically will have wait lists for those people that are in those types of subsidized housing or affordable markets. And so if that is the use case, again, the content that you're creating is probably more resident and, resident focused. So that's probably your primary goals is focusing on just maintaining those current residents and utilizing your social media content as kind of an event board, highlighting local events. One thing that you have to know is, there may be things that are surrounding you nearby, even if they don't have transportation. These are even things that from a community perspective that we see is, if you see a great event, maybe that would come from your resident marketing budget where you could get a shuttle that could take them from this location, from your property, to a nearby event. We've seen a lot of success in there. The other piece is there's just really great content that people will consume on a daily basis. I highlighted a few of those. Those are some of those kind of your DIYs, the decors, content that's going to resonate with any user. And then when you're talking about in a local market and really trying to go hyper-local, see if there's things that are around that you guys can, that you can put in front of them so that they can have, that information so they can, if they choose to do that. Or if your property, again, chooses to participate and host some type of event, those would be some great publicity. Take some pictures, and those are some great things that, to publish as well on your page.
Bit of a technical question. What happens if you've lost access to your old pages? Maybe the person who had the login information is gone and you can't change them, and you're creating new pages. How would you recommend driving attention to those new pages so that the older ones are disregarded and attention is really paid to your new pages that you're trying to make more current and active?
Absolutely. I think, again, that's a question that we get all the time. If you work with, marketing experts and Facebook preferred partners like Soci, we have direct access and work with our contacts there, and so we can help you guys claim, merge, delete pages if that's something that is of interest. Again, feel free to reach out to us. We can talk that through. For the pages, again, I've seen a lot of groups that have found rogue pages or pages that it was built by somebody else. They have access. You'll never gain access to it. The first approach is to try to do more of an online audit and cleanup of those pages. So that would be probably step one. So if we can try to merge it all into one and they can bring in followers, or if we need to get those deleted for those pages, if it didn't really fit, or if you just kind of want to start over there, that's probably step one. Step two is when you go through that process and you start cleaning up those pages, if you can gain access temporarily for those pages, I say it's really important to create a campaign that lets people know, here is our new official page, and do a consecutive campaign. Don't just post one time, actually post it. And you actually can run an ad within Facebook, and you can allocate dollars to speak specifically to your fans. Facebook now has the ability, again, to control how many people see it. So if you have 100 fans, you can run an ad to try to talk to all of your current residents, or all of the current followers that are in the page. So there's some ad types that you guys can run as you go through that transition period, as you're phasing out those other pages so you don't lose those followers and keep up that momentum.
How would you respond to a review when you know the person has never lived at your property?
So that is a really important topic. I know we didn't have a focus today on online reputation reviews, and so I'm happy to take that conversation offline as well. But to answer that pretty quickly, just on the basis of time, if we see that maybe it was a competitor or someone that just didn't live at the property, there are ways to flag that review and to go through the proper approval. We've seen where people have gone out and identified a person's name. There's specific things. If you're looking at Yelp, for example, there's ways to flag that. Again, you can respond in a way that's very professional. I'm so sorry to hear that experience. Feel free to reach out to us and contact us directly. That is still a genuine response to those type of reviews. But do look into if they are breaking the rules depending on which social review site that they're posting to. There are times where you can flag it and you can effectively get those to be removed.
And I think our final question that we have time for is, do you find that videos posted to social media facilitate more engagement than just text or images?
This is a really important topic, and I'm very pro video. The reason why I say this is there's some stats that have come out recently that talked about, as we move into this next year, that 75% of internet consumption is going to be through video. So knowing that that is the trend, I think from a video perspective, it's much easier for a person to consume video. Maybe it's from that, we all grew up in the different, we've all kind of grown up with iPads and computers and TVs, etc. So video content is very easy to consume versus having to read it. It's quick and easy. The caveat there is, please, if you are creating video content, don't put a 60-minute long video into Facebook. If you look at the actual statistics, you'll see a drop-off about 20, 30 seconds. So make sure that you can optimize the content that you're creating. It's very short and sweet, concise, tells a story, and you'll get people to interact with that content, absolutely. And make sure if you, again, utilizing a technology system that they can directly publish into important social sites like Facebook and have that native posting capabilities, like Sochi does as well. So great question.
That's all the time we have for questions today, but we have a lot of great questions that unfortunately we can't get to. So if we didn't get to your question, Jacob and his team will follow up with you afterward. Thanks again for joining us, and you'll be receiving a follow-up email later this week with a link to the webinar.